English and higher ed, the communication department. So I kind of poured myself into the literature here, looking at the STEM pathway. And something that stuck out to me very early on was that 40% of Texas high school graduates, so something that directly affects all of us, enrolled in community college, had scored below college readiness standards. So that's about every other student or so that's coming into the advising field, and they're looking at their scores and they're just not quite ready. So we know that it's a service that we have to provide to get those students ready. But only 5 to 6% of students that are originally enrolled in those developmental math ever go on to actually complete a college level course with an A, B, or C. And I thought that was just astounding. So there's a lot of students there that we're missing in the pathway that are stepping out for some reason, and maybe it's just that length of time in developmental courses. Research also indicates that taking credit-bearing courses, which is where the new policy is headed towards, increases the likelihood of persistence, where spending more time and money on extended developmental coursework had a negative impact. So the more time, the more semesters they have to go through, and the more money that they have to spend trying to get to that college level work, the less likely they are to actually persist and continue in their program. Some studies indicate that the best delivery format, especially for traditional students, so not necessarily for non-traditional students, people who are returning, is the face-to-face delivery format. And so that's one of the things that we'll see kind of come up and where a lot of the institutions are headed towards. We're going to take this go here. All right. And then the primary placement, the primary policy, like Ryan had mentioned, for placing students in developmental courses is based on technology and testing software. So it's either TSI, and some institutions also might look at ACT or SAT scores to exempt them. But if they fail any part of ACT or SAT or have a lower enough score on any of that part, they have to go on and take the TSI. So almost all placement is based on that technology and software. I also looked at some alternatives to traditional implementation, and one of them was partnerships with area high school campuses. So going out into the school districts, which we have represented here, this increases the rigor and college readiness for the students that are in high school and they're getting that college experience at that age so that they're a little bit more prepared when they get to that point. Completing introductory or college algebra in isolation prior to the beginning of the first fall semester. So students who are coming in to enroll, either whether it's an introductory course, developmental course, or algebra, if they take it separately before they go in and take other classes where they're going to be juggling more things, they tend to be more successful. So getting them in a summer course before the fall semester can actually be beneficial according to the research. And then looking at other factors, frequent and consistent advising enables a holistic approach. So not just seeing them for registration, meeting with the students throughout the semester, looking at other things that, like Ryan had mentioned, taking a holistic view of students' abilities can benefit the planning that you do. So I looked at 5 different elements in our research. The first one was how and when are students connected with an advisor or academic counselor at your institution. And while some institutions had a little bit of leeway, if they were a transfer student or if they didn't have to take developmental courses, almost all institutions, the advisor was the gatekeeper to registration. It was one of the first things they were notified. You've been accepted. Now meet with an advisor to plan your courses, etc. So overall, they said, we're at the forefront of all of this. They have to see that we get registered. They're the gatekeepers. They can't register or they don't register typically until they speak with an advisor. The second question was, what instructional delivery methods are used for developmental math? And there were 3 that came up: face-to-face, online, and Emporium. Emporium was something I was less familiar with, but it's that structure that has students that are taking math from all different levels within one class, and so they're learning maybe from one instructor or 2 instructors, and they may be at all different levels using some type of online software. But overall, they use face-to-face for developmental courses. I would never put a developmental math student online, and found that our online-only students were not successful, and so we began only face-to-face delivery. And so I'll talk about the themes, where that's moving, the recommendation for that here in just a moment. Number 5, when advising students enrolled in developmental math, how do you maintain regular contact with your advisees? And I was a little disappointed to find that they typically don't. And only if they're at risk or if there's some type of an early alert. And my experience, I know I'm not an advisor, but I do advise 25 students within our department. And I know the relationships and the significance that they come in, weekly, semi-weekly, and they I'm struggling with this class, or what do you think I should be looking at for next semester? And we develop that relationship that lasts all the way through. And to know that they're not really seeing them unless there's a problem, there's just some missing areas there. So we put our thumb down if we see bad grades coming in. As far as me reaching out to those students, only if they're kind of an at-risk student, and that was defined differently by different people. And I guess we're not following up with the students. So for us, the only reasons we might kind of connect with them throughout the semester would be if we receive some sort of, for us, they're called an early alert. So they're registering these students and then they're off. They're not making that connection with them again unless there's a problem. And so they're not catching back up with them until there's already an issue to be dealt with and they're already falling behind. How do you advise a current student who has taken developmental math and was unsuccessful? I was lifted by so many advisors talking about how they try to encourage this. They try to be kind of a coach to them. They try to tell them you can do it. Let's figure out what's going on so that we can help you solve those problems. So there was a lot of encouragement there, but there's only so much as you can do. They also reinforced the must-pass idea. Once again, you can't move on until you get these classes passed or get the score. So retake became the mantra. Either retake to class or retake to TSI. So they'll look at them sometimes and say, well, you were close, or you didn't miss that many classes, you just had a bad test or something, and let's retake the TSI and maybe you can buoy that score enough that you can go ahead and move on. So retake kind of became the theme for that. And number 7, do you refer developmental students to academic support services? Overwhelmingly, yes. All institutions had some type of a tutoring system, whether it be a math lab or a math tutor specifically, and a couple had a built-in kind of a tutoring credit hour that they would use. So as you can see here, we have students can go to the sim lab for help. We have there's a math collaboration. There's always an instructor available, or refer them to the math lab. But overwhelmingly, there are tutors available. So that is something that all institutions are providing. So overall, in my findings, community college partners operate fairly similarly in the way they operate. It's coming down from the policy. TSI, this is where you're headed because of your score, and this is what we can do with that. Advising happens almost often at registration, and then again, only throughout the semester if there's an issue, if they're struggling academically. So they're letting them go until there's a problem, and now it's trying to dig them back out of a hole. And then tutoring is the primary intervention tool. Occasionally there was a report for student services if there's a disability or something maybe happening there, but mostly tutoring is providing extra support and movement to face-to-face delivery. So advisors said they're really consciously thinking about putting students who are developmental, who are struggling in an online situation. So recommendations, more frequent advising, which ties into the last recommendation as well as the personalized planning. With more frequent advising, you're catching students as the problems begin to surface and not when they're already in a hole, which I know is very difficult because most institutions, these community colleges, you have 2 or 3 advisors maybe, and they're dealing with a couple of hundred students, and that's overwhelming. And so maybe some type of a grant or some kind of avenue for funding to bring in more individuals that can work with students and build that relationship with them. Face-to-face delivery, especially for traditional students, is really a significant indicator that they would do better in the course. And then having some type of a built-in tutoring, which kind of doubles because if you have like the credit hour, it gives them a little bit of credit for a class that they're taking anyway. So even though that developmental math course may not be credit bearing, you can take this 1 hour elective or something like that. So anyways, I appreciate you listening. I'm going to go ahead and let Andrew take over from here.
Okay, so within this section, we really looked at the advising perceptions of not only the students, but also how they were conducting their advising when working with developmental math students. So the combination of both academic instruction and intrusive and proactive support was found to be more productive in promoting the persistence and academic success within their programs. And first-generation college students were more likely to believe that they were underprepared for college. So when they were coming into the colleges, they did not necessarily know what the process was, what forms to fill out, what classes to sign up for. So there was kind of that gap between other students and they're having difficulties learning what it is they needed to do. So in a study where they were looking at first generation students in developmental math or developmental courses, they were looking at if the needs of the students were not met, they may experience anger, lack of motivation, lack of performance, and personal dissatisfaction. So they're trying to figure out how to avoid this within the courses. And they found that students who have their basic needs met are generally more likely to be primed and thrive within the classroom environment. So learning what the needs of these students are and how can we provide them. So the interview protocol questions that we specifically looked at were, are there any processes to ensure that the students visit you? What do you perceive to be the most challenging aspect of preparing developmental math students for college level coursework? Describe your advising when working with students that are unaware of the TSI process. What do you think is the most important when advising a student who is placed in a developmental course? And what do you perceive are the needs of first generation students in developmental math? So two main themes emerged from these questions: support and encouragement. And overall, developmental math students were required to meet with academic advisors, as Cohen was stating, and it was found at 4 of the 6 community colleges that we looked at. And when it comes to support and encouragement, almost every participant mentioned support, and over half mentioned encouragement multiple times within each question. So support is referenced as the resources that are provided in order to assist students. And this can range from anywhere from tutoring services to courses and explaining what the processes are proactively and what the needs of the students are. With encouragement, it was providing support for communication in order to stimulate student development. So just letting students know that we're here for you, we support you, we want you to be successful. One of the participants explained that when working with students, it's learning what they want to do. So if you want to be a doctor but you're in developmental math, it's not necessarily that you're not going to be successful. Let's figure out what it's going to take to make you successful so you can become a doctor. And working with the students to make this happen. So just a few quotes from the participants with regards to support. So that's what I believe the most is the communication to the student and putting action to the words. So really coming through and working with the students to make sure they know that you're there and providing those resources. The whole process of supporting them is being accountable and knowing that this is something that I have to accomplish. So explaining to them, these courses are here to help you be more successful later on and making sure that they really understand why they're in these courses. And then constantly referring them to tutoring, testing if they need any help, or if they need accommodations. So coming in when you're working with Christian students or other students, they may not know that there are resources that are available. So really reaching out before it becomes an issue and explaining, these are the services that we provide. We have tutoring. Let's go to the tutoring services and see if this can help for you. Encouragement, this is one of the most important needs, and that they are there for the students and that we are here for them. So from the moment they walk in the door, making sure the students know that everybody on campus supports them and wants to help them. So you're pretty much just being the cheerleader, supporter, helping build their confidence. And then it's really an investment, making them know that we are investing in them and that we believe in them, and calling them out when they are not holding up their end of the deal. And then I think it's most important that this is to be positive. So constantly encouraging students throughout the process. A few implications. An introductory course. A few of the colleges stated they did have an introductory course where they explained all the processes from the moment they enroll to the courses and explaining everything that they had to do. And they found that this was really productive. So this is one way to kind of help the students learn what they need to do in the environment. Also, collaboration between advising, student support, and instructors. It was found in a few areas that sometimes they're a little siloed and they don't know what the others are doing. So kind of collaborating and discussing the needs of the students and knowing what resources are available. Gearing support and encouragement towards individual needs and interests of each student. So learning what the student wants to do. So if they want to become a doctor, kind of gearing your advising towards the needs of that student rather than taking kind of a overall approach of everybody needs to take these courses. And then ensuring advisors and instructors are both knowledgeable of the challenges and needs of first-generation college students. So every student coming in has different needs and experiences, so kind of looking at what those challenges are to make sure everybody understands that students coming in may have these experiences or lack these experiences and kind of focus on those. And then now Sarah's going to talk about
All right, so I got the last 3 questions. Basically, perceptions concerning college level coursework, whether or not they had to pay for the class or if they wanted to, and then gender, and whether or not gender plays a role in math, which is very relevant to our discussion today. So basically, these were the questions that we asked our participants, and we asked academic advisors. And I was kind of surprised by the outcomes. Basically, I thought that there would be attitudes and feelings about men and women, or that students would think certain things when it came to their beliefs about developmental math and college coursework. But the results were kind of surprising. So basically, our literature looked at student perceptions, and the literature says that students have a negative perception of being placed in developmental math, right? So we all know that. They were surprised that high school wouldn't prepare them for what they were wanting to do, and that they're, even though they knew that they were gaining important things, they weren't really excited about taking the classes. And they looked at this as detrimental. So for question 13, most of our respondents, 3 out of 5, shared that students often don't realize the degree of difficulty that college level coursework presents. They talked about negative math perceptions. So for example, you know, they think, I just didn't have to do that, then I could just move forward with my degree plan. If you just didn't make me do it, it would be great. Not realizing inherently that you need that math somewhere in chemistry later on, right? Most respondents also shared that the student perception of paying for developmental classes had to do with maybe a Pell Grant. So for example, you know, they don't really like paying for them, they just think it's a waste of time and money and don't necessarily feel like they're paying for something and they aren't really getting any credit out of it. So it was kind of surprising to me because I felt like if they are taking the class and it's a valuable class and you'll need it for later, then obviously this is what you need to do and paying for it would be great. But they didn't. They said, no, I don't want to have to pay for that. And then question 15. The advisors were really torn. I had read responses from some that said, you know, men really don't like taking developmental classes because they believe they should just be smart enough to go into the regular ones. And then other advisors at other colleges said, well, you know, women, they really don't like taking the classes because they know they're already not good at math, and so they really don't want to have to take another math class. And when we talk about those gendered perceptions, it's inherent in us to believe that, yes, women are told from the beginning that they can do anything a man can do, right? That's in our society today, that's prevalent. But in actuality, the advisors are saying no. They're saying some women come with gendered perceptions about whether or not they can actually complete developmental math and whether or not that developmental math class is actually beneficial to the things that they want to do. Policy implications for me, we're making students more aware of the level of rigor in college courses, and I would say middle school. I think that a lot of students don't perceive in middle school that the choices they make in middle school affect them in high school and subsequently in college, if that's what they want to do. Positive advising and motivation training for advisors. Academic advisors are often on the front line. So they're dealing with those at-risk and retention issues way before administrators get to see them. And so by giving them the opportunity to advise holistically and deal with other issues that students might be having, it's really beneficial. And turning back those gendered stereotypes. Oh, if you really want to go and be a scientist, then you can do that. And here's how you can do that. And this is why it's going to be important. Within rural communities, trying to provide positive math experiences, which is something in last year's presentation, a lot of the student perceptions were, well, I had this bad experience in math in middle school, and so I'm not a good math student anymore. So building on that belief from last year's portion of this research, is actually seen in the students this year. So they also believe, I'm not a good math student, so I'm not gonna do well in developmental math. By giving them the opportunity to think positively about what they could accomplish if they want to, maybe we can upset some of that, especially in STEM areas. And then allowing the dual enrollment in credit-bearing classes basically offset that time and cost to graduation delay. You're hearing already in the literature that students are not happy about paying for the classes, they think they're holding them back. I'm really hoping that the results from next year would be that, well, by implementing this new set of standards that we have to co-curricular enrollment, it will be beneficial. So, Dr. Gerson?
In the higher education research, the body of literature, the number one unit of analysis in research and higher education is the student, for obvious reasons. We want to know what the student outcomes are. How do we get students who enroll in college to persist and complete, right? And also, what do they do once they complete? In terms of workforce participation, health decisions, contributions in terms of civic engagement, so on and so forth. The whole notion of higher education as a public good. The second unit of analysis in higher education literature tends to be the university as an organization, right? How do institutions fulfill their role as institutions of providing education and providing a service that promotes a societal good? How good are we as institutions in providing access to all members of society, those who have been historically marginalized as well? The third unit of analysis tends to be the faculty. What role do faculty play in educational outcomes? What role do faculty play in the shared governance of the decision-making processes in any post-secondary institution? At the bottom of the totem pole, in the higher education literature, are staff members, whether it be mid-level staff, early career staff, advisors, counselors. They tend to be the least researched, least understood, but yet our research findings indicate that advisors at colleges, counselors in high schools play an important role. So the first person they meet on a college campus when they first step up to the institution, they are required to meet with them for orientation and registration. When there are issues, they're the ones that go to them. Right? Particularly at the two-year sector. When the community sector, we know, nationally on average, 65–60% of all instruction are done by adjuncts within the community college sector. So the primary individual that's there Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 tends to be the non-academic or the co-curricular individuals on campus. Yet, there's very little research on them. Here, we have seen from the data, has emerged from the data, is the roles in which they play in promoting success for those students in developmental mathematics. Indeed, all developmental education. And so, their roles in ensuring that not only do they fulfill the role in providing advice, proper information in terms of policies, as we know that managerial professionals that Gary Rhodes would describe are important, that their roles are to apply policies and procedures, yet they're very little at times at the table in the shared governance tables. Right? So they're empowered. Their job is to empower students, but sometimes they don't feel empowered themselves in many of these institutions. And so the role that they play in coaching and motivating students, particularly in developmental education, math in particular, is critical. And our students have done an excellent job in teasing out some of the roles and many of the ways in which they fulfill that role. With that, I want to go ahead and open it up to some questions that you may have regarding the research and findings and policy implications.
I just wanted to make sure I understood co-enroll. Does that mean you're in a developmental math class and the regular math class? It's, okay, cool. I just want to make sure.
I have a question about that, so you all found, I mean, the law just came into effect. And so for fall, the requirement is 25%. Some people are far along with it.
Actually, almost all the ones we talked to have already moved past the 75.
In West Texas?
Oh,
Our partnership schools.
yeah. I think of the 6 that we talked to, and I'd have to look at the responses. I'm almost certain it was at least 4 of them that already met the 75.
They were already coming.
Midland College is not.
No, they have not.
Have you all?
But they said that you're gonna be ready to do that in the fall.
No, only 25%.
Ranger, I know, has met their 75. I'm trying to remember the other ones. I'd have to look at the
For
law.
this coming fall.
Right,
Because, I
so,
mean, the law just came, I'm
Right.
just trying to figure out how.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah.
a lot of them just,
They kind of tripped off the Band-Aid, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
They
Ranger,
said,
they
all right,
just
we're
did
gonna
it
start.
and went all into it.
Well, and I think part of what the perception was from the academic advisor standpoint was, these are students that if they were able to be in a regular math class, maybe part-time with the assistance of the tutoring center, like that being another, or math lab class specifically, then that would be, helping them sit for a remediation period, have a math lab, a supplemental tutoring service, and be receiving credit in a regular course-bearing class. That was their model, what they discussed.
Right, I think most people are doing what Midland College is doing, so the students are enrolled in the developmental, I mean, this has to all happen in one semester.
Yeah.
So most students are going to be enrolled in 8 hours of math. So they're in a developmental math class, like a math lab.
Yeah.
And the transfer level class. And Ranger has 7,
Started.
because, I mean, these are all, our concern is these are like some of these people are super low.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't add and subtract.
Several of their perceptions though were, the delineation between the adult basic education and developmental education. So, within that new law structure, they're talking about separating out the add and subtract group from the group that is just shy of being college ready. So they may need, the intermediate algebra support, or they may need some of the more, they can add and subtract obviously, but they have some of those adult basic education issues under control.
Because we found when we really looked at TSI, we had almost no one in the ABE level. But that doesn't mean that they can add and subtract. ABE oftentimes means they're like
K-8,
pre-math.
like K-8, I think is the designation, right?
Oh, no, not even near K-8. I mean, most children in first grade can add.
My kindergartner.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean,
So I'm just amazed. So Ranger,
Ranger.
It'll be interesting to see what the success rate will be of that.
Well, I think, the literature, I'm trying to remember, I think it was Illinois or something like that where they had tested it, but, the literature says they actually will be more successful in doing
well,
that.
Tennessee and
So,
Kentucky, I think, are the ones that are frequently cited.
so, I would say, I would encourage you to maybe give it a shot, because they're
Oh,
likely
we're
to be
way
more
out ahead.
successful.
That's why I'm so surprised.
But are you saying that Ranger is that they are,
75.
but they've separated out some students that they're saying these are, we're not going to co-enroll these students.
Yeah, Ranger, that when we interviewed her, she didn't get into like that level of specificity.
Okay.
She said we are already there, we just went ahead and did it. So,
Because the 3 levels are gone.
right,
3 levels of developmental math.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm
So,
thinking,
Dr.
yeah.
Wade is raising a methodological problem.
Yes.
So, let's ask from a qualitative research perspective, how would you triangulate your findings? So, did you see a catalog that shows the co-rec
No.
presented? So, this is an interesting little subject area. So first of all, we know the context of co-rec has been, actually, people are piloting all over. And if you haven't seen the dissertation by Pamela Campbell, who is the dean at San Jacinto College, she did she implemented COREC and they transferred the track success at San Jacinto. This is 4 years ago, and it came out of tech. Her research is, she's an EBD student. So the data center, you know, the emphasis on COREC, and Midland has been an early adopter, which is why her accounts are going
Oh
up.
my gosh.
But the question is, when you do qualitative, and you go and you interview,
Right.
you can have a person say, oh, yeah, we're way out there, but I think you probably have to see next fall's catalog
Right.
to see, or the registration fee
Right, and
to
that's
triangulate.
right, and what those actually, if the students are actually persisting at that level, because it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing if they're successful.
Well, and the data center didn't do correct. That wasn't MathWise at all.
Not the data center.
No, so this is not
That's
data
the
center.
the higher education coordinating board, right, there.
It's actually just the legislature.
Yeah.
In fact, we were told, this is, don't worry about correct. This is never gonna fly. That was in February. By May, we're like, are you kidding me? Because really, no one had implemented much. The data center model, that was, MathWise
Was different.
pretty low level of implementation. And then suddenly, no one's gonna be in developmental math, really. Let's put that pressure on the high schools.
Well, I mean, it's not that they won't be in developmental math, they'll be in both.
Both simultaneously,
Yeah.
but not
Math
necessarily
is
the very lowest level. That,
Yes, everyone outside of ABE has to be in this,
Right,
25%.
Yeah.
In ABE, I mean, I can only speak for Midland College's standpoint, but because we looked at that. And out of, I don't know, goodness, almost 2,000 students in developmental math, fewer than 5 fell into ABE. So anyway, I mean, that's a monumental undertaking, good for Ranger.
Or it'd be interesting to see what they're actually doing. If they're willing to say that to us, maybe that they've already completed that, but, you know, but a dean or higher might have a different administrative view of what they're actually implementing.
Well, it's just,
So-
I mean, I know my faculty have worked all year long implementing this. Because you have to, it's not just one course, you have to have a developmental period with college algebra, a developmental period with stat, a developmental period with quantitative reasoning, with, I
with
mean,
the
it's,
math lab connected in there.
Right.
yes.
Dr. McDonald?
Yeah.
Would there be a better incidence of lower math, like what's a lower math that they might persist at? I think your findings were like statistics, right? Was the entry level math and students?
Oh, in terms of like where students go. Yeah, I mean, so our findings have been that like statistics is, for all intents and purposes, like a end of the road for most students, right?
Yes.
Like by far, right? I mean, like 60% of students, they just get funneled into statistics. That's the last math class they ever take.
Yes,
Right.
and quantitative,
Quantitative
whatever you wanna
reasoning.
call it, quantitative reasoning, or
Logic.
contemporary math. That's like everyday math.
Yeah.
Anyone should be able
It's
to
about
have.
balance their checkbook, they should be able to do it, right?
See, and it's interesting too because like, so obviously our work's focused in California, which is very systemic, right? Like the community colleges are designed to feed in the Cal States and the UC system. And the Cal States will accept a lot of those quantitative reasoning courses, but the UCs are like, no way, right? Like they don't even take them. And so like there's this interesting like experience happening there too, where you see very low numbers of students take quantitative reasoning. And so it even pushes more students into statistics, I think.
Well, in the state of Texas, the Dana Center has really done a Herculean job on a lot of, they've come up with this guide, or I'm going to call it. So it lists all of the four-year schools that will take statistics for these majors, quantitative reasoning for these majors. And what I see in Texas is more and more four-year schools are going, like if you're an English major, a variety of, non-STEM, then they will take the quantitative reasoning and the stat.
Hmm.
So, So I don't know, it's just,
That's interesting.
they just sit down and
Are
go,
those core classes, are those core curriculum classes, when the law says they have to?
Well-
Minor detail.
well,
And I know that it's been an issue with UT Austin and A&M, because they didn't want to take that, but.
well, and so then, you know, what will transfer and what will count towards your degree are two very
Two different things.
Right.
So, at,
So they'll transfer.
at UT and probably at A&M, I've not looked at that recently, almost everyone's first math class in their degree is calculus. And so if that's right, yes, these will transfer. But
They
they're
don't
not
count.
gonna
They don't
count towards your
apply.
degree, those are
Right.
two very different things.
They don't apply, right?
Exactly.
But I think that brings up like a really, interesting point, because I think that, I think this was true in some of the Tennessee studies, that like, just because I put you in a college level course and you're successful, it doesn't mean I was directing you in some specific direction, right? Like, yeah, you got credit for that course, but would it have been the best course for you in terms of what you want to do?
Exactly, and we found that at Gimlet College.
Yeah.
So sometimes students go into STAT or the quantitative, or the quantitative reasoning, and suddenly the light bulb comes on, they love math, and so then they want to switch to a STEM route. They are no more prepared for college algebra than flying to the moon.
Okay.
So we had to have another class. I mean, we are overwhelmed with the number of classes,
Yeah.
which is another little concern. Even I can't keep it straight, how our poor advisors are going to do this.
They're relying on that new software, they're really excited.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't registered anyone yet.
Other questions?
I had a question. Now, when you interview the leaders, the students, now how aware are the students about the importance of math in later stages of their education? Could you see, I believe, based on what I read, applied mathematics is the way to love mathematics. One of the best way to make someone love mathematics is to show why you need these linear transformations, why you need this matrix algebra. So do you think our students are aware of the need for math even in education, for example,
And the advisors commented several times.
Yeah, we didn't interview students, we only interviewed.
the advisors?
But the advisor perception was, most students don't understand that they have to take these math classes, and then when they do get to college and they have to take them, they're not prepared for them. And for many of them, they're not gonna get to do the things that they want to do because they can't do the math. They've already said, well, the study last year, for example, with Dr. Madsen, said, student perceptions ranged from, well, I didn't know I needed to know any of that. I wish I would have applied myself in high school. I wish I could have known that I needed to take these classes to be able to have this career. So I think in middle school, they aren't taught the importance of that. They're put on a track or a pathway, and you pick that very early on in middle school or high school in Texas. And so they don't have the opportunity to know, well, what happens if I fall out of that? Or if I have to take this instead? Or what if I don't want to go into a health science career now? I really want to do business. What does that mean? Or if I want to go from business
And I
to
think
math
that's
science.
where the community partnerships between community colleges and the schools or the middle schools can be very relevant in
Right.
terms of showing them the long term where that's going to take them and how they would use it later.
And I would think community college, especially all the way down to middle school in the ISD, I would think that would be beneficial. Having a conversation with career counselors, having them visit campuses, having them understand, hey, are you interested in going to college? What are you gonna do? What kind of job are you gonna get? Do you wanna be a lineman? Up on the line, they make $50,000 a year. This is what you need to do, and it only requires a year. If they knew that in middle school, when they're interested still, then it might make different choices in high school, which means different choices long-term. And we had a discussion earlier about the applicability of a four-year degree as opposed to the community college degree. And I would argue, I think a four-year degree gives you choices. I grew up with a family where my family is probably, I'm the only person with an advanced degree, okay? My brother and my sister both don't have a degree, and I was the first in my family to go to college. My mom actually went to college after me. My grandparents could afford to send a child for a certificate, but not themselves be educated. So for me, my bachelor's degree gave me choices. You know, I could have gotten my associate's degree, and I knew I wanted to go to 4 years, but by getting an intermediate degree and an associate's, I had the ability to first get a job where I could support myself, and if I wanted to go on, then I had the option. When I got my 4-year degree, all of a sudden, yeah, I made the same money as I made with my associates, but guess what? 10 years down the road, I was applicable for a management job instead of being just behind the bank counter, you know. And then when I decided to choose my master's, I was eligible to teach in college in those areas where I had taught, where I had worked before. So to me, it was the applicability of not necessarily the actual degree or what I had learned, but I have this credential and it says I'm capable of doing these things. For me, I'm a lifelong learner. So going back to school at 40 was not a surprise. You know, I wanted my PhD. My husband said, okay, well, go right ahead. When you get surplus out of a teaching career, that's what you do, right? So for me, it's been a good experience. But for your little girl who's gotten her degree and all of a sudden she finds herself divorced, she has choices. At least she can support her kids. Yeah, I mean, I'm worried about the one that doesn't get the degree, is stuck in that ADN, in that associate nursing degree, that LVN degree, makes $30,000 a year and has to support her 2 kids. What kind of choices does she have as a single parent? Because maybe it won't affect her marriage right now, but 10 years down the road, you know.
Right, I mean, we can say it's very short-sighted of students, which I say all the time.
Yeah,
But on the other hand, you know, they have money. I mean,
It
you
is.
have to weigh some things.
yeah. And I would love to see, personally, this is just my input, I'd love to see them coming out of high school with an associate's degree. To me, I think if you put an 18-year-old out who's accelerated and excited and prepared to make $30,000 a year and support themselves and their family in a lower STEM field, where's the harm in that? How come they can't work as a lab person or as a radiology person? Or, I mean, these are people who want to go to work. They don't necessarily want to go on. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. Yeah. But yeah, but I mean, eventually we're going to have to understand that by high school they need to be able to do those things. So it's one thing to say they shouldn't. We can't move them that far. But it's another. I mean, these are people who are having children. You know,
Oh, I know.
who are tax-paying citizens who go out into the world and they can't do much more than work at the counter with the girl.
I
You
think
know.
an interesting study so you all know it's been done, is with early college. So what happens, I don't think many of the early college high schools are following those students. So what happens, yes, they get a high percentage of them get the college, get the high school diploma and the college, the associate degree at the same time. And then what happens, because they're awfully young, there's a real lack of maturity.
I agree. And we get at Tech as an academic the academic advising, you get students who have 60 hours. Who come from those districts, they've gone to early college, high school, they have 60 hours. And they are not prepared to be a college junior. They don't even know what they want to major in.
Exactly, so
they're getting that.
is this a good thing or not? I don't know.
I agree with
I
you.
only know from personal experiences, and that's a very small sample of advisings that have come through, but when they enter with that associate's degree and they're in those junior classes and they're graduating with a bachelor's degree at 20,
Right.
and I'm like, you're a good kid, but you're not ready for this professional position.
Right.
How about we look at getting your master's program, the interim master's program, which furthers their education, but also gives them a little bit of time for maturity.
Exactly, I mean,
It's
I
really
have a
important
child in that position, and I'm like, you have to second and get your master's. I mean, she couldn't even rent a car, literally.
Right.
Yeah, she's not 25, right?
Yes.
That's
I
true.
agree. I mean, I think that there are some cultural boundaries that you have to work within as well, and so.
Other questions?
Are you gonna send us the PowerPoint?
Yes, absolutely. Good.
Stacy, S. Payne, she's the contact for PowerPoint.
Collector.
Fantastic. All right, well, thank you very much, and thank you to the students that.
So I just want to say thank you. I'm sure Stacy will see the show well, but from Texas Tech's part of view, for our partners, thank you so much. It's been a rich experience for our students, 3 years of students, coming through these partnerships and being on your campus, and asking questions. And we've never, in the higher ed program, and probably in those programs, we never done this. I don't know if you've seen a lot of PhD students out on your campus before from Tech, but it offers, you know, it sort of was this nice intersection of events that gave us the opportunity to get to know you better, get to know what you're doing in your student population, and think about how we can work with you. I think there's a whole bunch of more focused research that we could do in the future, and so I would encourage you, if you're interested, you can contact me, you can contact Dr. Garcia, Dr. McNaughton, and they're always looking for partners, and we like to write grants, we like to have funding. We can do, if you do HSI grants, we can do Title V grants and make them into research, but we have to be very careful when we do that, because they're activity grants. So that you do something, but we have to have a replicable model to track and research, like you were talking about longitudinally looking at early college, high school. By the way, go look at El Central College, it's the first early college high school in the state of Texas. They've got more than 20 years of graduates. It's on-site work, and we could track, and that's a really good point, I think. What do they actually do, and what are the gains? But anyway, thank you. Thanks for having us down today, and thank you to our awesome students. And I just want to thank Stacy. She's just been